How are you?
Morning, Kevin.
Good morning.
And is it Gail today?
I know it's Carlos. Gayer is on vacation.
Okay. Hi, Carlos.
Hello.
Guess what?
What?
They've gone to the hospital.
Oh, how
I've got a
exciting.
being born as we speak.
Wow.
Good thing you're up already. So
All right. And did Alpha and Aisha have the link kept still?
Yeah.
Yeah. Good. Okay.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Kevin.
Hi, Connie.
Thanks for coming.
Oh,
Sue,
you're welcome.
this has just been extraordinary. I'm blown away by what you're doing with Osgreen.
Oh,
Just
that's exciting. How lovely.
beautiful, beautiful.
Yeah, thank you. We've had an
Yes.
amazing adventure. Goodness me, I was going to say, I've had an amazing adventure for the last 30 years, but that's another story altogether.
Yes.
The work that we've been doing together the last few nights has been quite astounding.
Yes, it's just
we've had the leaders together develop
yes.
strategy, and whoa.
Have you caught any of it, Kevin?
I haven't had a chance. No, it's been quite a busy week for me.
Yes, I
No.
hear you. Yeah, it's all on YouTube. They post it's 5 days a week.
Okay.
And some of the events are, but some of them are fantastic. And this 2 weeks on climate has just been absolutely superb. Jim, this is Kevin.
Hi, Kevin.
Hi. Nice to see you.
And
Good
we can-
morning, Jim.
Good morning, Sue.
Caroline from the UK. Hi.
Hi, Carolyn.
Thank you for coming. Sam, you were so great yesterday, right? I think it was
thank
yesterday.
you. Oh, I
was
think it was yesterday. I don't remember.
or
Early
yesterday or the day before. Yeah, it was
Day
really
before.
wonderful. Day before. Wonderful, wonderful.
Jim, I just wanted to let you know that I have a grandchild being born as we speak. My son and his wife have gone off to the hospital.
Oh my
And-
goodness.
Such
Yeah.
exciting news.
Well, it's
Wow.
a lot of broken sleep in the lead up to getting up at 2 a.m. anyway. Oh, dear.
You've had your biorhythms crashing for 2 weeks now.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting.
Sue's in Australia, everybody. So she's in the middle of the night.
And Sam.
And Sam, yeah, that's right.
Thank you so much. Is this your first grandchild, Sue?
This is my 5th grandchild.
Uh-huh.
And I have
Oh, goodness.
4 that are aged 11 to 15. So it's quite a big gap.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
That's extraordinary. Well done. Well done. And you're a grandmother a number of times over too, right, Connie?
Yes, I didn't have children, but I married a man with 3. So there's 7 grandkids now.
Wow.
Mm.
Yeah, it's confused. The whole thing is confusing for me with climate. If I were childbearing age, I couldn't do it now. But somehow the species keeps going, A lot lower birth rate now.
Yeah. All over.
Yep.
Yeah.
Let me just
And
check
so
in with Carlos. Carlos, are you all set to go today?
Hi, Jim. Yes, I have the art card ready, the audio ready. Yes.
Mhm.
Okay.
I just
Well,
got a message from Aisha
We'll
and Al.
start with the art card again, Carlos, and wait until I finish my introduction before doing the coherent breathing.
Of course.
Yeah, cool. Cool.
I've
Sam,
just
they
got a
need
So,
message.
to-
a quick question. I'll share the R card. When you guys turn on your videos, I'll share the R card and then I will for 30 seconds, take it off and then you'll start, right, Jim?
That's correct. That's
Perfect.
correct.
Perfect. I will do.
And then we just
Sorry,
got Kevin.
Sam, do they need the link?
Yeah, I think they've got it, but it might be taking them to the regular webinar and not the panelist side of things.
Hang on, I'll resend. I'll send.
The
Yeah.
panelist link came yesterday.
Yeah, I've tried to send it to them, but I've just got a message from them saying the webinar will start soon. So maybe they're in a waiting room or they're in the
Right.
waiting room
Are
for the
these
main-
people that were supposed to join you as a panelist?
This
Yeah,
is Alpha and Aisha.
Oh,
This
okay. I don't
coming
know
on
whether
as
we,
well.
Well, you can resend the
maybe
panelists.
send them, Sam, your link, because it's all kind of
Hmm.
one link. So send them, then we can change their names because they'll come in as Sam Dakin, but we can
Okay.
change their names. That'd be the simplest way to do it.
I'll see if
So
it
I
works.
have a question, Jim. We don't have Georg, is that right? We have
Yeah, we have
Carlos.
Carlos. Georg's
Okay.
on vacation.
So Kevin and Caroline and Elizabeth, who's not here yet, all had slides and sent them in at the very last minute. Do you have the slides or can they screen share?
Yeah, it's best if you just screen share. That's the
Yeah.
simplest way. And that way you
If I can.
control
Send it to them.
when the slides change and all of that. So you guys all know how to screen share. Why don't we
Yeah.
take a
Can
few
we just
moments
check
to
it?
just,
Can we just check it works okay? Can I just
yeah,
check?
Carolyn, why don't you go first?
There we go. So you got that?
Yeah. Can you make it? There you go. Full
Yeah, yeah.
screen. Excellent. Excellent.
Is that okay?
Excellent.
Wonderful.
Stop your share. And then Kevin, why don't you try yours?
Yep.
Perfect.
All right.
Perfect. And then Elizabeth just joined.
Oh,
Welcome, Elizabeth.
good.
Hi, sorry I'm a few minutes late.
No
Hi.
worries. Now, Elizabeth, do you have a slideshow, PowerPoint or anything?
I sent it in and I can pull it up so it's ready unless the
Yeah.
team is going to pull it up automatically.
No, it's better if you do it. So
Oh.
when I or Connie calls on you, it's just easier if the participants do it. Because then you can control when you go from one slide to another without saying next slide, please.
Yeah.
Okay.
So do you want to try it?
Yeah, so let me pull it up first.
Elizabeth, while you're doing that, do I pronounce your last name Alured?
Yes, that's
Okay.
perfect. So I'm trying to get into full screen view here.
Oh, there's Alpha.
Okay,
Hey, Alpha.
so you want me
Good
to try
afternoon
this
from
here?
Australia.
Yeah,
Yes.
just
Go
make sure
ahead.
it works.
Okay,
Alpha, do you want to change your name? Because you've got Sam's
Yes.
name.
So, youth leading the world Sierra Leone.
That
Good
looks
idea.
fine, Elizabeth.
looks
Yeah,
fine.
but
Okay,
You
so
can go,
I'll
if
stop
you can go
sharing.
to full screen, that would eliminate the left sidebar.
Oh, you mean a slideshow? view.
Yeah, close the thumbnails. So, yes.
There we go.
Okay,
Perfect.
great.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Okay, and then let's try Sam. Are you gonna do something, Sam?
Yeah, I'll pop it up now. I'll just check it's all working. Cool.
There we go.
Great.
So everybody's ready to go. And now, Alpha, do you know how to change your name?
Yes, but let me try.
It's a right click on the name.
On the three dots on the top right-hand side of your screen.
Yeah, just get the three dots on the right, then you just scroll down and it says rename. I can do it if you'd like.
Yes, help me do it.
While you're doing that, Jim, I just wanted to say to all the wonderful speakers lined up tonight, I won't stay and listen to you all. I will watch it video afterwards, and it is right at the core of my journey of why I'm here today, is that fostering that journey, shift from overwhelmed to being engaged and active change makers. That's been the fundamental driver of what I've been doing for the last 50 years. So I'm really keen to hear what you have to say and perhaps to talk more together afterwards.
Okay.
Say again.
Good.
So I didn't quite get what you were saying, Sue. I'm sorry.
Oh, just that I won't stay because it's
Yeah.
the middle of the night. I won't stay, but I'm really interested in what
Oh,
they've
for
all-
sure. For sure. Well, I'll send you the link for the recording.
Yeah. And so I'm keen to, you know, be in touch and share ideas and things. Yes.
Yeah, perfect.
I'd love that. That would be great.
Yes,
Oh, and here
because
comes another Sam.
you're all working with youth. You're all working with youth and climate because you don't know each other. So,
I know Elizabeth. Hi, Elizabeth.
oh, good.
Yeah.
Good to see you, Caroline.
Good to see you too.
Yeah. Do we know which we're presenting in?
Yeah, I'll tell you in a second. I just want to make sure Aisa gets renamed. Aisa,
Yes.
can you rename, or do you want me to help rename you?
Sure.
Okay, how do you spell your name?
It's AISHA.
Okay,
AISHA.
perfect.
Thank you.
Okay, everyone, let me just go over what's going to happen. In about 4 minutes, Carlos will put up an art card, and then you'll all turn off your videos, put yourselves on mute. And while the art card is up for about 30 seconds or so, we hook up to all of our live streaming partners. We've been going out over several hundred live streaming partners every day on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, etc. There will probably be 50 to 75 people that actually come onto the Zoom call. And so there's an active chat that will take place as you guys are talking. But most people are watching passively out there. And then the art card comes down, and I'll say a few 4 or 5 minutes of welcome. We will then do a heart coherence breathing technique that we use every day for Humanity Rising as we begin our programs. And then I will tee up Sue, because we've had this partnership with Oz Green and Youth Leading the World every day. So Sue's been organizing various young people from various parts of the world. It's been really a thrilling start to our program. So this will be a summary day. They'll take about 15 minutes. And then I will introduce Connie, and then Elizabeth, Kevin, Carolyn will wax eloquent for the next hour, 75 minutes or so. And we will then conclude our program.
So Jim, the sequence is Caroline with her research, Elizabeth with CPA, and then Kevin.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you will tee them up. You'll be moderating as you've done before. And then I'll come back in after your presentations are done, and then we'll dialogue to the balance of the time. We start promptly at the top of the hour. We end whenever it finishes. Yesterday, we went a full 2 hours because it was such an extraordinary conversation. But we normally go 90 minutes start to finish, but we'll just make that judgment call toward the end. This is, I think, a very powerful session, given everything that's happening out there. So we want to make sure you have ample time to express what what you would like to, and then we'll bring it to a close.
I
Does
read
that
on
work?
it sounds great to me. I read on the email that we were invited to jump to another space to further the conversation afterwards. Is
Yeah,
that
at the end of the call, there's what we call an after session chat group. You receive the link in your
Yeah.
email, and the link will also be put in the chat box on
okay?
a couple of occasions. So you're more than welcome to join that. It's a much smaller group, obviously, but they really enjoy more personal interchange with the various speakers from time to time. So that's an opportunity.
Great. That's great. I just wanted to check that.
I'm just letting you know I have a 12:30 client.
Yeah.
So I'll need to jump off, right?
Sure.
Hour,
No
the
problem.
90-minute point.
No problem. Since we do this every day, we're very informal, and people come in and out. People have pets. We've had a guy even lying in bed because he had COVID. Still wanted to participate. Sue gets up at 2 o'clock in the morning. It's all good.
I just gave the puppy a 2-hour run in the woods in the hope that he'll sleep now. So he's passed out in the next room, but you never know. Yeah.
You never know. It's all good, everyone. It's all good.
So each of us is speaking around 10 minutes. That's the message I got.
Yeah, I think that's the drill.
Perfect.
I'll do my best.
You have a lot to say, Caroline.
Yeah.
So much good information of yours. I'm glad you're here.
I'm really pleased to be here. Thanks, Elizabeth.
I'm glad you're all here. Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Okay, everyone, we're a minute out before we go live. So turn off your videos and put yourself on mute, and we will see you on the other side. Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison, and I want to welcome you today to Humanity Rising as we complete a 10-day program on the Conference of Parties that has been taking place in Sharm el-Sheikh. This is their concluding day there in Egypt, as once again the governments of the world have come together, as they have for the past 27 years, and accomplished essentially nothing. As Greta Thunberg, the Swedish youth activist, said last year, it's all just blah, blah, blah. And those of you who've been watching the news know that there's been a lot of acrimony between the climate activists and the governments. The COP has been besieged by members of the oil lobby and the fossil fuel industry that have once again made it impossible for the governments to act. The government of Egypt, in fact, was putting the climate activists under surveillance. The way to get the official schedule and know what was happening required anyone using the app to give all their information, their emails, their photographs, their itineraries. So the climate activists were all who participated were under surveillance. And yet the global situation continues to deteriorate. Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, on the opening day of the COP 10 days ago, said that the world was now facing what he called climate hell. And one of the observations that was made by Tom Eddington several days ago on our program here at Humanity Rising, he says language matters. It's no longer appropriate to talk about global warming causing climate change. We have to stop talking about climate change. The only realistic term that we should be using is climate disaster. And I think that's important. We are in code red. The climate is spinning out of control, escalating turbulence around the world is destabilizing countries. We saw just a few months ago that Pakistan was experiencing flooding that put a third of the entire country underwater. The United States in Florida had the second worst hurricane in its entire history that left dozens of people dead and billions of dollars in destruction. And so we're looking at the most severe crisis ever to present itself to the human race that has been entirely of our own doing. And yet our governments do nothing. It's a level, I would say, of criminal negligence that's without precedent in the history of the world, in the face of the greatest crisis in the history of the world. And that's why we're going to be concluding today with a very special program, which is for us, the people, as we take in the reality that because the governments won't do anything, that we, the people, have to do something. And so how do we process the climate anxiety into activism? How do we understand the reality with ruthless realism and come together in such a way that the people of the world can make the difference that the government should be making, but are refusing to engage in? So the responsibility, I would say the accountability of each and every one of us at this moment is unprecedented. There are no bystanders anymore. Every person on earth is being affected, and therefore every individual needs to be accountable, to be responsible for doing whatever it is that they can do in whatever way to understand, to communicate, and to take action. So the theme as we close our 10-day program on the Conference of Parties is really how to move from anxiety to activism, and how we need to do the inner work as well as the outer work simultaneously, because nothing less will suffice to save us as humanity quite literally teeters on the brink, along with a million other species, of self-destruction. So this is a hard truth, but it is the truth. And so we need, with the maturity of our spiritual beings, to take action and do what we can in this present moment of both challenge, but enormous opportunity for human renewal. Before we dive into the program, let us pause, as we always do, to engage in coherent breathing. It's the most important thing any of us can do, is just to maintain our inner equilibrium in a world that is now spinning very quickly out of control. And the breathing that we do is what they call coherent breathing. So in a moment, Carlos will put up an art card, and you'll hear the sound of the bell. And when you hear the sound of the bell, just start to breathe in slowly for about 5.5 seconds. You hear another bell, and breathe out for 5.5 seconds. If you do that, you take in 5.5 breaths in a minute and 5.5 liters of air. It's one of the most ancient breathing practices known to humanity, going back thousands of years. And according to modern science, it is the most effective way to bring coherence, between your heart and your brain, optimize all your body systems, create emotional calm, simultaneously with enhanced mental acuity. And we encourage everyone everywhere, whatever you're doing, is to engage in regulated breathing, coherent breathing, because we need to fortify ourselves in very fundamental and I would say existential ways, so that the breathing that we do as we begin each session on Humanity Rising isn't just an academic exercise and a feel-good exercise. It may be the most important thing that we do to create our inner coherence in a world that is descending into chaos. So let us breathe together, and then we will take 10 breaths. So it's not very long, but it'll give you a taste, and you'll feel the immediate effect of this kind of coherent breathing. And then we'll commence our program. Thank you, everyone. Let us breathe together. Carlos, did you activate the audio? Sorry, everyone, that didn't quite work out, but I think you'll get the central essence of what it is that we seek to do with coherence breathing. But let's now begin our program. As you know, we have partnered with Oz Green in Australia and Youth Leading the World, which is an offshoot of Oz Green. So every morning, Sue Lennox gets up at 2 o'clock in the morning because she's in Australia to bring to our attention what Oz Green is doing in Youth Leading the World, and the various young people that we've had over the last 10 days from various countries. So Sue, I want to really thank you for everything that you've done, and turn the program for the next 15 minutes or so over to you and some of the young people who've been present with us for this COP program.
Wonderful, Jim, and thank you so much. It's been an amazing opportunity to connect with you and with this incredible network that you've built up around Humanity Rising. And I look forward to connecting more over the coming weeks, months and years. And I have particular heartfelt interest in this topic of making that shift. It's something that's driven me for the last 50 years, is how do we shift from overwhelm to engaged action? How do we be present with what's actually taking place in the world, and to allow that and to be informed and allow it to inform the way that we live in the world? And so I look forward to catching up with everyone again beyond this evening. And tonight, to wrap up, we've got Sam, Aisha, and Alpha with us. Sam from Australia, Aisha and Alpha from Sierra Leone. Over the last 3 days, we've been having an extraordinary gathering of leaders within the Youth Leading the World community, looking at what's our strategy for this time and going forward. And they're going to check in with you where we're up to with that. And I'd love to hand it over and welcome Sam and Aisha and Alpha to be present. Over to you, Sam.
Thank you, Sue. I'll just pop my little presentation on.
And say, Alpha and Aisha, you want to come on as well?
I'm here. Hello.
Good morning.
Good morning. Although it's afternoon.
Yeah, good afternoon.
Just adding on what Sue said, it's been so incredible for us young people from Africa to Australia to be able to come together and make a really strategic plan to make some positive environmental change in our area, and in a way where we can connect with each other without borders across the world. And before I begin, I'd just like to read a quote that Sue shared with me last night by Margaret Mead, which reads, "Never doubt that a small group of committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has." Over the last few days, we first started off by taking what you call a pulse of the planet, and shared concerns from our regions and identified the global challenges that we all face. We then compiled all our concerns and thought, what ties all these things together? What drives these concerns, which brought us to poor economic systems, mismanagement of land and resources, greed and industrialization. And you can see a vast amount of environmental and social issues listed below on the slide. And then after sharing these concerns, we then came together and thought, how do we want the world to be? What change needs to be, how do we want the world to be, and how do we want to see a fairer future in the world? Which then brought us to our vision. Our forests are protected. People have alternative sustainable income. We are actively engaged in regenerating the world and reforestation. There are strong local networks for food growing everywhere, including in cities. We are locally self-reliant for safer foods. We grow locally appropriate food and learn from traditional ways and practice permaculture, organic farming, and regenerative farming. We grow what we eat. We live simply in communities of sharing. Low-cost eco-housing options make housing affordable and accessible to all. Rocket stoves and solar energy are affordable. Community systems make energy accessible for all. Homes are for living in, not investment and wealth generation. And there's more. We are informed and sensitized about the climate crisis. We are prepared to act and recover and have the capacity to minimize harm. There are local food banks for managing disasters, and there are local community systems in place to monitor and report dangers and assist recovery. Our rivers are protected and riparian zones restored. There is safe, accessible drinking water for all. People are educated and respect the importance of our waterways. Women are equal and protected from violence. There is safe and quality education for all children. Women are empowered, respected, and valued, and have an important role in leading change. There are systems in place to support women to undertake further education. Our economic systems foster living within the limits of one planet. They are based on principles of localized economies, equity, fairness, and sustainability. Products are useful, practical, resilient, repairable, and reusable, and carbon impacts are minimized and incorporated into accounting systems. We then took our vision and broke it down step by step into clear ideas for change. And Alpha was going to share our first one with you, if Alpha's there.
Yes, yes.
Good morning.
Good afternoon from Sweden.
Or good afternoon.
Yes. I am going to read out our vision for food resilience. We say there are a strong local network for food growing everywhere, including in cities. We are locally self-resilient for staple food. We grow local appropriate food and learn from traditional ways and practice permaculture, organic farming, and regenerative agriculture. We grow what we eat and we eat what we grow. To achieve this vision, we came up with the following ideas for change. We say school have gardens and teach kids how to grow food. Identify lands that can be shared or used for community gardening. Community gardens are funded and supported by government and financially resilient. Education on low-cost farming and food growing techniques. Rooftop gardens in cities. Source of effective existing gardens. Sharing seeds and food. Surplus and stable foods. Thick cassava arrowed roots. Shop from growers market, not from supermarkets. Shop for and grow only what you eat. Teach young people about healthy eating. Create small gardens at our homes. Creating greenhouses to propagate trees and seedlings. That's all.
Thank you, Alpha. And Ayesha really wanted to read out our next slide, which was about gender equality and women's rights.
Okay. For our concern of women empowerment, we came up with a few ideas, change ideas for that. And here, the first one was to create girls eco clubs in schools to encourage and support girls' participation. And we organize congresses or summits for women and girls to work out their own ideas, and get funding for scholarships for women to undertake further education or study, and also create pathways for participation for girls and women, and educate women about their rights, do research existing support systems for women, and teach young boys about relationships, gender equality, and women issues. Create safe houses for women experiencing abuse. So these were the ideas we came up with regarding women empowerment.
We also workshopped the section of our vision on water resilience. So we thought of ideas such as grey water recycling, water gardens with rainwater, switching to composting toilets that are affordable and accessible, Osgreen Community Environmental Action Program, online campaigns to protect our waterways, and build boreholes and wells and tanks to supply water to those who need it. There was also a big concern of plastic waste in our waterway, so ideas such as creating eco bricks to reduce plastic waste by stuffing plastic into bottles, having citizens testing all over the world, and make sure that young people have a sense of importance for rivers near their homes or schools through Osgreen programs like My River. Protection of riparian zones is law. Biosand filtration units for villages that need clean drinking water, and manage solid waste to educate people about waste reduction. And I'd just like to say that this is only the start. We've definitely got our work cut out for us. And we, a small group of young people from different sides of the globe, are working together and not relying on, as I've heard Jim say so many times before, the blah, blah, blah to make some change. And we'll be meeting weekly to bring these change ideas into fruition and continue working on our vision that we've read out to you earlier. And while we're here, we just thought we'd share our stories from Youth Leading the World and how we're sitting here today with you. So Aisha and Alpha, over to you guys.
Well, I think I missed that, right, Aisha? Hello, all. Youth Leading the World Sierra Leone is an organization that is established 2020. And to date, we have several challenges we face along the way. Together, youth together, to have youth together to do something in our country is not easy. So having Youth Leading the World here, an initiative of Green, Sulinox, it was a very hard task for us to bring youth together in order to tackle climate change. But we never think of this before this time. We are fortunate that we are brought up by Green, Youth Leading the World, to also stand and fight climate change in this part of the country. Now we realize that this we are doing is one of the most important things we should do to save the world. We never know about climate change before this time. We have not contacted anyone about climate change. So we are doing those things that will really cause disasters about climate change. But having contacted Linux and Green, Youth Leading the World, now we understand about climate change, and we also try to involve our colleagues, to sensitize them, to engage them, to come together and together fight climate change. I want to say thanks to Green, thanks to Youth Leading the World, thanks to Linux for bringing us together, for bringing us on board to see that we can eradicate climate change in this part of the world. And for now, we have been informed, we have been involved, we know what is climate change. We'll continue to involve on actions on climate change till our lifetime, because this is what we're supposed to do as human beings, not for today, but for the future. I wonder if this fight, we don't put hands together, how the future will be, how the earth will be in the next 50 years. So I am so happy being part of Youth Leading the World, being a lead for Youth Leading the World, though it was not easy. We have a lot of challenges along the way. Having youth together, youth may want immediate benefits in anything they involve themselves. If there is no benefit they got, sometimes they won't come together. They won't be together even. So it takes us the time. I have to have different lessons from school on how to mobilize my colleagues, on how to get them together. And to date, we have about 50 facilitators that we have trained, and we have more than 300 participants that has participated in Youth Leading the World. And presently, we are still on the youth engagement, and we are going to involve more youth. We are going to see that these youth are involved and these youth are included into action so that they will involve others. And that is how the trend will be going. And every youth will think that this change must be a change where he or she should be included. So we say thanks to Youth Leading the World for bringing us on board, for changing our lives today, because it was very difficult for us when we started this. Even, to present, it was a problem. But now we can speak and somebody can hear what we are saying. So we want to say thanks, bravo. We want to say a very big thank you to us Green, to Youth Leading the World, for making us being change makers in this part of the country. We are proud of that. Thank you.
Wonderful, Alpha. Thank you so much. And Sam and Aisha, can I invite you to be brief with your final comments?
Totally. Aisha, did you want to go first?
Of course. I just wanted to say that I am grateful to Youth Leading the World for making me, like, building me into the person I am today. Because when I joined Youth Leading the World 2 years ago, I had no idea about what climate change was, or whether there is anything I can do to change anything, any of the disasters that were going on in my community. Like, I would see them happening, and in my head, I would just be like, I can't get involved. There's nothing I can do. But even though so far we have not done much, but at least the idea is here that, okay, there are plans in my head that if I put into action, we can create even the smallest change, even if it's not big, but we can make a small change. And okay, when I joined Youth Leading the World, I knew nothing about what climate change was, and I was not that outspoken person. I was a very nervous and shy person who can barely speak in public or even make a proper introduction. But after joining you guys have molded me and supported me and pushed me to move from a girl who knows nothing about climate change to becoming a climate change activist. So I'm so grateful for that, and now I can confidently sit in front of a lot of people and speak without getting nervous, although I get nervous a bit, but not as much as I used to. But the fact that I can sit here, have an opportunity to be in this platform here and be heard and hear from people, that is a great opportunity that I never thought I would ever have. And I just think that there are a lot of girls out there who also need just such opportunities. Like, they have the potentials in them. They just need a little push. They just need the right platform, the right channel, the right people to just push them to come to have a voice, to do what I am doing right now, or even better. So thank you to Leading the World, and I wish that girls team and push young girls like me to be great people, great change leaders. Yeah, thank you. So I had to say.
Thank you, Aisha. You might like to stick your camera on as well.
I'm just going to keep mine really brief, as we often do at the end of workshops sometimes, and just say that Youth Leading the World, after getting involved, I feel like I have joined a global family, and I'm so grateful for that, and all of the connections and all of the lessons that I've learned. So yeah, that's just all I needed to say, I think. And I'll just hand back over quickly to Alpha and Aisha to talk about some things with Youth Leading the World Sierra Leone very briefly before we go.
Come again?
Oh, just if you would like, I'll do it for you, Alpha,
Yeah,
if
sure.
you like. If you would like to support the team in Sierra Leone, Alpha might put his email in the chat as well. You can reach him directly, or you can also make donations through Osgreen. And if you would like to support Youth Leading the World, you can also do donations through Osgreen. And thank you very much. I look forward to continuing this conversation. And back to you, Jim.
Thank you so much, Sue and Aisha, Alpha, Sam. This has been a splendid program, and I encourage all of you to take note of Oz Green and youth leading the world, and contribute particularly to those in Sierra Leone. So thank you. And Sue, you've been heroic, getting up at 2 o'clock in the morning every day for the COP. It's extraordinary, deeply appreciative.
Thank you, Jim. And I look forward to catching up next week and following through on some of the ideas that are bubbling.
Good, great.
Well, thank you for all that you do. If you want to talk about me getting up every morning, what about doing it for, 580 something mornings? Yay.
It's my joy. It's my joy. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all. Okay, everyone. Those are our youth. Though that's the future. Those are the people that we have to walk beside and encourage and mentor and support in every way that we can as they take the actions necessary to secure their future. I'd like to now invite Connie Zweig to join the program, who is convening this session today from anxiety to action and the inner and outer work of climate resilience. Connie, you'll know, she's developed a number of programs for Humanity Rising. She's a retired therapist. She's written a number of seminal and best-selling books: Meeting the Shadow, Romancing the Shadow, The Inner Work of Age. She's been a climate activist for many, many years, and really is passionate about how, through the inner work that we do, we can be more effective in the outer work that we do. And so, Connie, I want to thank you for all that you've done and turn the program over to you.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Alpha and Aisha. Would you please turn your cameras off too now? It was really a great presentation. Jim, your intro, as it often does, moved me to tears. Your eloquence is so moving. So as Jim said, we're going to shift a little bit from the last 10 days to the inner world. Now, the inner world of psychology as it connects to our outer work. The group Generations Together calls the climate destruction child abuse. And you can join them to fight for children's rights. The film Kids First, about teens 13 to 16, was presented at COP, and it's now available on YouTube for all of us to watch. Elders Climate Action is presenting workshops for everyone on climate anxiety and grief. Third Act, Bill McKibben's community, asks you to take a pledge to move your financial resources out of the money pipeline, shifting funds from fossil fuel banks to community banks. You can sign the pledge on thirdact.org. So these are the few of the things that we can do right away, but we need to contemplate some crucial questions, all of us in any generation. How do we cope with this fear and grief about climate? How do we speak to our patients, clients, students, kids, and grandkids about their mental health in the climate crisis? How do we use activism as an antidote to our anxiety and helplessness? And what blocks our activism? I write in my book about the shadow. What is it that sabotages our conscious intentions to act on social justice issues? How do we align our actions with our values in each moment? And, you know, we hear about building resilient coastlines in cities. How do we build resilience, inner resilience, internal resilience for the turbulence to come? So after tuning in to COP27 and Humanity Rising, many of us struggle with difficult feelings. And today we're going to address this issue, and we're going to offer advice and practices that you can take with you after this event. So first I want to introduce Dr. Caroline Hickman from the UK. She's going to talk about the global climate anxiety in kids and young people. Hi, Caroline. Around the world, children and young people have the largest stake in finding solutions to the climate and biodiversity crisis. We need to find ways to protect and support children while acknowledging their fears. As youth are taking to the streets and the courts to express their frustration, how can we as adults examine our defenses and listen to them more honestly to find ways to navigate the world together? Caroline Hickman is a psychotherapist and lecturer at the University of Bath, researching children and young people's emotional responses to the climate crisis, examining eco-anxiety, eco-empathy, trauma, moral injury, and intergenerational stress. She's co-author on a 2021 quantitative global study into children and young people's emotions about climate change that was published in The Lancet. She's been developing a range of therapeutic and educational tools, a psychological assessment model for eco-anxiety, and she's delivered workshops on climate psychology, emotional resilience, and mental health internationally. Caroline, we can't see you. You're too dark. Is there a way to get a light on you? Thank you. Thanks for joining us today. And I am going to turn it over to you. You need to unmute. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Connie. Thank you for that introduction. I'm going to screen share. So bear with me. So hopefully that's come up nice. Thank you so much for inviting me here today. I'm so pleased to be here. I'm going to talk about research, but I'm going to interweave the quant research with some responses in the qualitative research that I've been doing for 10 years with children and young people globally, and also one or two clinical examples, because nothing illustrates this better than the voices of the young people that I've been speaking with. So I want to thank them, take this opportunity to thank them and to help their voices be heard here. And I want to start by saying this might sound a little strange, but I don't think we fully understand climate distress and climate anxiety. And I think we have to have the hubris and the humility and the compassion to be studying this and understanding it more. That's where I think we're at. Because we can't use Western thinking and Western medical models, Western thought and mental health structures to really understand this, because it is different. So I'm going to be introducing and encouraging and hopefully inspiring different ways of seeing and thinking and imagining and feeling our way forwards. So this is the internal activism. I want to introduce the idea of a climate crisis lens. If we look through that lens, then we will see things differently. And let me explain what I mean. You see, the last thing I want to do is take away people's climate anxiety, because you only feel that anxiety because you care. And I want you to feel proud that you care, not embarrassed or ashamed or try and get rid of that anxiety, which traditional Western psychiatry would ask us to do. Obviously, we need to support people with those difficult feelings, but that anxiety is what connects us with empathic understanding about what's happening to people all over the world. So I want us to be proud of it and find ways to transform it, because I think we should be proud that we care rather than try and get rid of it. This is a young woman in the United States. She said to me recently, she said, "I wish I was mad. I wish I was insane. I said, are you sure? You know, do you know what it is that you're wishing for here? This is a young woman who works in environmental movements, who's been very aware for a long time. She said, yeah. She said, because if I was insane, if I was mad, she said, then my climate anxiety would be part of that madness. And it wouldn't be grounded in reality, and climate change, the climate crisis wouldn't be happening. She chose that over her anxiety about climate. And for me, that just, she's doing well in therapy. She's working and finding her way through this. So I don't want this to be a negative story, but I want to use that to illustrate just how this is stretching us into parts of our psyche that we've never met before. And that's how deeply that distress can be felt. And that's what we need to respect. So very quickly, this is a really emotionally healthy response. I'm sure Elizabeth and others are going to be talking about this, so I'm not going to talk about this massively. But, you know, we measure mental health by looking at our capacity to respond to external reality. And external reality, if we're aware and awake, tells us awful things are happening all over the world. Therefore, it's mentally healthy to feel this distress. I would worry about people that weren't feeling it. I always wonder how they're defending against it. So this is the paradox of the nature of this distress. Again, I don't want to lose it. I want to find ways to be in different relationship with it, so the distress doesn't overwhelm, and we don't have to shut it down to survive. We need to be in relationship with it. Traditionally, anxiety is caused by a thing. Climate anxiety is caused by relationship, and particularly with young people and children, they can often feel it differently. And that's because of the relationship, of the failure of us, older folk, to take action, to make this okay. And it's that failure that I'm going to show in the statistics in a minute. But I just want to introduce this so the statistics make more sense rather than just do numbers. All of these feelings, as far as I'm concerned, form part of the emotional biodiversity of climate anxiety. It's not just anxiety. It includes hope, hopelessness, fantasies, sadness, grief, frustration, blame, anger. These all have their place. I don't want to get rid of any of these. I just don't want any of them to completely overwhelm a person. And ideally, we don't want to be feeling them all at the same time on the same day. But often what happens is we cycle our way through them. And we don't feel these equally all the time. So when we talk about climate distress and anxiety, it's not the same for everybody. And there are different layers. So what I've been trying to think about is the difference between mild anxiety, which I honestly think everybody on the planet is feeling. People may have pretty reasonable defenses around that so that they can cope with those feelings. But mild anxiety, climate distress, you're reassured. Oh, it's okay. The government will save us. Technology will save us. Recycling will do it. So that anxiety can be supported quite quickly and easily. But as we go through these layers, that belief can start to be undermined and eroded. And I think this message fits beautifully with the message here today in the introduction about it's up to people to become part of the solutions here. That's the empowering message. The dependence on others will often leave us feeling disillusioned, despairing, abandoned, betrayed. At the worst end, and thankfully few people are feeling it at the worst end, but we have to make sure that we pay attention to this, particularly for some children and young people who are saying they don't know how to cope living in this world. First thing I always say to them, either in therapy or in the psychoeducation groups that I run for young people and activists, is your feelings make perfect sense. There's meaning in this. You're not crazy. Young person in the Maldives said to me, he said, I'm sad. My friends are dying. My friends, the fish, are dying. Often one of the crucial relationships here that we need to pay attention to is the relationship between ourselves and the other being the animals that we share this planet with. We need to be doing this both for ourselves and for them, don't we? Another young person in the Maldives said, you know, it's different for us. It's different for young people. A 10-year-old here in the UK got really cross with me a few years ago. He was right. He said, Karen, you don't get it. He said, you grew up thinking polar bears would be here forever. He said, I've grown up expecting them to go extinct. So the older people, we need to be able to imagine what it's like for younger people in order to be part of those conversations and those solutions. And that's an empathic move that we need to make. A child in the Maldives said to me, climate change is like Thanos in the Avengers Endgame, whose ideology is to kill off half of life in the universe so the other half can thrive. He said, but we're the half being killed off. So there's other things here that young people have been saying to me. There's profound empathy, compassion. We heard this at the start of today's call from the young activists, beautifully demonstrating empathy, compassion, embodying that vulnerability. But vulnerability is about strength and power and ideas and finding ways to work together. That belief and faith in doing that, caring about future generations, determination, and this relationship with the planet and with nature. What do you need from us? Well, you need us to tell the truth and have courage and find ways to stand alongside you in this different normality. Otherwise, we're leaving young people. This is another young person in the UK said, why should I want to live in a world that doesn't care? If the Sally Weintraub talks about the culture of uncare beautifully as a psychologist, psychoanalyst, what we have to do is put care at the center of all of the things we do, whether they're external forms of activism or internal forms of activism. Our hearts need to be involved, not just our heads. So very quickly, let me give you some numbers. This is the research that Connie referenced, which we published last year in the Lancet Planetary Health. And because what I had been thinking for some time was, it's not ecological destruction. This is causing the worst distress for people, particularly for children and young people. It's the failure of people in power to act that causes the distress. Another way to think about this is it's the feelings about the feelings. Of course, we're distressed about what's happening to the planet and the environment, but it's the helplessness around that which can actually cause even worse distress. So this is where we go to the people in power. And this is about failure of governments to adequately address climate change, not just failing to adequately address it, but actually at the same time trying to say that they are addressing it. So what you've got there is a really unpleasant double bind message of, don't worry, we'll deal with it, or excuses and rationalizations for why they don't, none of which is adequate. So this was 10,000 children and young people in 10 different countries in the world. And 8 out of 10 told us that they were worrying about how climate change was threatening people and the planet. And this isn't just worrying, this isn't just emotion, this is also impact on daily functioning. Nearly half, 45%, said this was impacting on concentration, going to work, going to school, sleeping, spending time in nature. So it's this impact on physical daily activity. Now, this is lower in the UK. If you look at this graph, this shows that the countries who are less on the forefront of climate change at the moment, like the UK, the US, Finland, the impact on daily living is lower. But I'm going to show you something interesting in a moment. Of course, understandable, much higher. India, Philippines, Nigeria, of course. And then the groups of countries in the middle, Brazil. This was last year. I suspect all of those dark blue lines are going to be moving up after the last year that we've had. So, distress around climate change, we need to think about it in terms of physical impact on daily life, but also emotion and thinking. It's not just feelings. So this is Climate Change Makes Me Feel. These are the worldwide figures. 67% sad, 67% afraid, 62% anxious. There's a very clear, strong message here that unless we take action, we are leaving children and young people to bear these feelings alone. This is what I believe is my responsibility, our responsibility, to acknowledge this and validate this. If we look at thinking, we see something interesting. 55% worldwide, but look, 53% UK. So the UK is not facing some of the worst impact of climate change at the moment, but their cognition, their thinking, their concern is very similar to the worldwide figure. So children and young people globally are sharing the emotional response and the cognitive, the thinking care. And this, I think, is astonishing and brilliant and wonderful. It's that interconnection globally, thinking about you won't have access to the same opportunities. Security threatened, of course, less in the UK, but look at this one. 8 out of 10 think that people have failed to take care of the planet. 83% was the worldwide figure, but it's 80% in the UK. So the children and young people in the UK think very similarly to the children in India, Nigeria, Bangladesh, the Maldives, who are on the forefront. And I think there's something really, really important in this. And then we have the worst case, 92% Philippines. I have to just keep saying sorry, Philippines. This is shocking that we're leaving the young people in the Philippines to be feeling this. 3/4 or more think the future is frightening. 75% worldwide, 73% UK, 92% Philippines. What are we doing? If we look at mental health, look at the impact of this, what are we doing that we're leaving young people to think the future is frightening? This is not okay. And that humanity is doomed. Over half worldwide and in the UK, 73% Philippines. Now, before you get too depressed, I'm going to turn it around and end on a different note. So bear with me. I'm nearly at the end, but please trust me, because this is transformative psychological understanding. In order to find that transformative internal and external activism, we have to go down into the bottom of this, and then we can return. The one thing we could do something about, and that platforms and groups and meetings like this can do something about now, which is, I'm so pleased to be here and be part of this conversation. Half of children and young people told us they were dismissed or ignored when they tried to talk about climate change. 48%. This is not okay. That's what these groups, these meetings, these conversations are trying to do something about today. And then if we link it to government inaction and the disillusionment and the failure of governments to take action, these are the UK figures. 65% thought governments were failing young people. 61% thought governments were lying about the impact of their actions. Look down the other end. 28% thought governments can be trusted. This is why I argue that the climate distress that we're talking about here is a relational distress. This isn't just about fixing the environment. It's about fixing the people who need to be doing better to support people with this. So yes, there is anguish and abandonment, but there is also resilience and confidence. This is the lovely group of people I did this research with. And this is a human rights issue. Subjecting young people to this distress, as far as I'm concerned, is a moral injury. And it's cruel, inhuman, degrading, and tortuous treatment by governments. It's a human rights issue. And it's this intersection between human rights, climate change, and climate distress. I promised you I would bring you to the end with something that felt redemptive, because we talk in psychotherapy about rupture, pain, and the hurt, and then repair. This is how we build resilience. So when we published this research, I started to get emails from young people all over the world, which is wonderful. And I'm going to read this email from a young woman. She has given permission, of course. I'm only a single private person studying in Germany, but I feel the urge to thank you and your colleagues for this research. What the study reveals makes me, for the first time ever, feel I'm not alone with the future and climate anxiety that I experience every day. She said she doesn't know where to go to get help. I sent her lots of ideas. I've been talking with her a bit. She said she thinks that study, those statistics, the validation she feels by that is an incredibly important step for young people around the world to emotionally connect and visually realize that no one of us is alone with this huge issue. And she really hopes the message of this study reaches politicians around the world. I promise you, I'm working on it, as well as psychological professions, so that we can react to the needs of young people. So reframing it like this, bringing us into relationship, gives us this opportunity to reframe our eco-anxiety to eco-understanding, eco-empathy, eco-compassion, eco-courage, eco-community, eco-awareness, eco-connection, belonging, meaning, care, and aliveness. This is the price we pay for caring, but I would not want that taken away from me. And I just want to know how to support others with it. Thank you.
Caroline, oh, how can I thank you for all that you're doing? This really clarified, brought into view, and as you said, validated what all of us are feeling and what the young people are feeling and what we feel for them. Thank you. Thank you so much. So you'll come back and join us for a conversation.
Oh, I'm not going anywhere. Yeah.
Thank you. And now I'm going to introduce Dr. Elizabeth Allured, and she's going to speak to us about climate anxiety in the therapy room. I want to open with a quote from archetypal psychologist James Hilman. He said, "Psychology, so dedicated to awakening human consciousness, needs to wake itself up to one of the most ancient human truths. We cannot be studied or cured apart from the planet." So many therapy clients, including young people, are reporting, as Caroline pointed out, really high levels of anxiety and distress due to government interaction on climate. How do we, I'm a clinician, but you can listen to this in the context of any helping professional, any way that you serve others, you can listen to this presentation. How do we best respond to the concerns when we hear them in people? This is, as Carolyn said, not a pathological based anxiety rooted in biology or fantasy. It's based on reality. So, and how do we deal with our own distress as helpers so that we can more accurately listen to others? Dr. Allured is a pioneer in training climate-aware therapists. She's a licensed psychologist and psychoanalyst on the teaching faculty at Adelphi University's postgrad programs in psychoanalysis and psychotherapy. She's published articles on the environmental crisis and mental health and presented at international conferences. She's co-founder and co-president of Climate Psychology Alliance, which I highly recommend to everyone who may be a psychologist, a family therapist, a social worker. And this organization addresses the psychological aspects of the climate crisis by training climate-aware therapists and focusing on community resilience and climate justice. Elizabeth has a private practice on Long Island. Thank you, thank you, thank you for coming and joining us.
Thank you so much, Connie. And thank you, Caroline, especially for laying a foundation for my talk about climate anxiety and how to think about it and how to interface with it with adolescents that we might be working with or living with or helping in other contexts. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay. I was given the topic of how to talk with adolescents about the climate crisis. but I gave it an alternative title, which seems more appropriate: How to Listen to Adolescents When They Bring Up the Climate Crisis. Because, as we all know, if we try to talk to adolescents about what we want to talk about, it often is not relevant to what they're thinking about and feeling. So what's really most crucial is to learn how to listen to adolescents when they're ready to talk about this, or when they sense that we are ready to listen to this topic. That's my next slide here. Can't quite advance this. There we go. Thanks for your patience. So as I'm beginning to talk about this here, if adolescents are talking to you about the climate crisis, you're doing something right, because they're not going to bring this up if they feel either you don't care about it, or if they don't see something in how you're living that this is important to you. So I think it's important, if we're clinicians, to have something in our clinical space that indicates that this is a matter of concern for us. And I put this picture of the Earth as seen from outer space up here in this presentation, because it's a picture that hangs in my therapy office. And it has stimulated numerous conversations about the issue, particularly because it was taken so long ago that the ice cap is quite large, and sometimes people remark about that. So you don't have to have a picture in your office. You can have houseplants, you can have magazines, Sierra Club magazines in the waiting room. And if you're a parent, if you want to engage with your adolescent about this, they really do need to think that it's on your mind as well. So however you can bring that up in a talkative conversation, that you're thinking about it, that's going to encourage them to bring it up. I'm including a quote here from a New Channel medicine person from Vancouver Island, whom I studied with a long time ago in 1987. And in his culture, there's this saying, there are those who listen and those who hear. And if we think about this, if we try to listen to adolescents, we have to be sure to really hear them. And how do we do that? If we're listening for feelings, especially difficult feelings of maybe overwhelm, helplessness, despair, if we can really try to feel and empathize with those feelings, then an adolescent will feel not only listened to, but also heard. And this is really crucial, because if adolescents can't talk through their feelings, as Carolyn was indicating they need to do, then they're not going to know what actions they want to take, because every adolescent's fears about this crisis are a little bit different than every other adolescent's fears about this, and griefs about this, and feelings of despair about this. So we need to really listen for the specifics of what this young person is concerned most about. And it might take a little time. But I've found if I just open up the conversation when an adolescent brings it up by saying, if I say something like, what is your biggest fear in all of this? For some, it's going to be that the world is going to end, in 80 years, or society is going to end. For someone else, it might be that my family's going to die sooner than I want them, sooner than they need to die. For other, it's going to be a fear of social justice concerns, that the world is going to get more and more unfair as rich countries ride this crisis out easier than less developed countries who have less resources to cope with things like famines and droughts and food shortages. So I think the mistake we often make is presuming that our concerns are felt by the adolescents who are coming to talk with us. And there may be some overlap, but I think in order to really help an adolescent, we need to go further and further into what are their specific concerns. Sometimes the surface concern might be something like everybody's going to die, but then below that, there's a concern about, will I be able to bring a child into the world safely? And this is becoming more and more of a concern. The research is showing that young people are really having doubts about whether this is a good idea to bring a child into the world. So the process of listening to someone is really crucial so that they can themselves understand maybe where they want to focus their efforts on in this crisis. It's also not uncommon for an adolescent to say one of the biggest concerns they have is that their parents seem to be not concerned about this. And if you can imagine being 15 or 16 years old and having parents who are kind of watching while Rome is starting to burn, or living in a house where the roof is leaking and the windows are falling out and they're sitting there reading their morning newspaper and drinking their coffee, it's hard to believe that these people really care about you. So maybe an important intervention that I use is encouraging adolescents to talk to their parents about this. And sometimes they'll say, well, they don't care about it. And I've given young people a Paul Hawkins book called Drawdown, which is an excellent book. I think the subtitle is The Most Comprehensive Guide Ever to Reducing Global Warming. And it's full of solutions, beautiful pictures, solutions going on in Africa with solar cook stoves, solutions in the US about regenerative farming. And it's a hopeful book, basically saying that the solutions are already here, we just need to implement them. So sometimes this book is taken home and it actually convinces parents that this is a topic for them to be concerned about. I actually feel that parents are concerned about this most of the time. They're just feeling overwhelmed. And so it's compartmentalized off somewhere. So, but sometimes their adolescence can wake them up to the topic in a way that they can tolerate it with something like a good book on the topic. So there are two typical types of clinical situations which I help kids with. And sometimes there's an overlap between both of those types. The first one I'll call pre-traumatic stress, where it often happens when an adolescent is in an environmental science class and the teacher lays the whole story out about what's going to happen in 8 years and 20 years and 30 years if we stay on this business as usual path. And then they'll say class dismissed. And then the kids will come into my office saying, I can't think about anything else. What's going to happen to me? Why aren't they concerned? And so this is kind of pre-traumatic stress where it's easy to get into catastrophizing present and future scenarios, what's going on now, what's going to happen later, a lot of grief and terror. My colleague, Lise Van Susteren, has written a lot about this. There's feelings of annihilation anxiety, personally, apocalyptic anxiety about the world going through some kind of apocalypse, and with, as I mentioned, obsessive thoughts, and also environmental injustice reactions to hearing about this news. The second type of clinical situation has to do with being exposed to an extreme weather event or some type of climate justice event currently. And oftentimes this will wake someone up to the full brunt and bore of the climate crisis, and they'll be in a state of shock, disbelief, numbness, anger. I put on here a picture of a tree falling over because one adolescent came in to see me when a tree in his backyard had been struck by lightning during a hurricane. And he had never experienced this before, and his power went out. And he had felt pretty invulnerable before this happened. And then suddenly he realized this is due to the climate crisis. And he needed to think through what he was going to, how to react to this and what it meant to him. So this can be a really teachable moment about how to model holding uncertainty. I think this is a crucial concept that's not talked about much, that we're often thinking that there's two reactions when we're talking to adolescents about this. Either we need to sort of shore them up by saying, this is all going to get resolved, we're going to work on this, you don't need to worry so much, or despair is relevant and there's really not much we can do about this, and we just have to kind of react to the situation. But in the middle is a place of uncertainty, which is really the best place to be. We don't know how this is going to play out. We don't know if it's going to be, business as usual for the next 10 years, or if our efforts are actually going to have a really serious impact for the better. So if we can model that uncertainty, then our adolescent clients and friends will be able to hold the uncertainty themselves. Need to validate their feelings of terror and whatever they're going through, and label them, as Caroline said, as normal and appropriate to the situation. And these are just a few statements you can use when someone does begin to talk about it, when you're doing a good job of providing an opening. Just say, I wonder if you've been thinking more about that topic. If you want to come back to it later, tell them you were really impacted when they spoke with you about it. You could say, it's relieving for me to be able to talk with you about this. So they don't think it's, putting you down in some spiral of despair. And you can also say, I wonder if this made you want to take any action about this problem, or maybe you just want to talk some more about it, because we don't want them to feel that we're passing this burden of responsibility of action just to them. They might just need to talk a lot about it, and that's okay, because they'll probably land in some place related to their own passions. The person whose tree was cut in half ended up talking about the social justice issues were the most disturbing part of this for him. And he was able to learn more about international conflicts and how they were contributing to resource problems, that countries weren't sharing resources with each other. And that's what he's doing in college now, is he's majoring in kind of international conflict resolution, and he's really going for that. So we can help these young people turn the anxiety and other feelings into action if we truly hear the depths of their concern and just let them talk, and not direct the talk, but provide open-ended questions for them to use as springboards into their own psyches and their own psychology about what's important to them as they see their life playing out ahead of them. So thank you for listening, and I'll go back to stopping my share.
Elizabeth, thank you. It occurs to me that your suggestions are also helpful for parents. So any adult teen child interaction, we can say, I wonder, and present open-ended questions to encourage the communication, and then validate, express empathy, and then validate. And that can really allow young people to feel less alone and less isolated in their feelings. And maybe, as you said, empower them into action. Thank you. Thank you so much. Good takeaway.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to introduce Kevin Gallagher of the Climate Wisdom Lab. Kevin's going to speak about how climate anxiety and other ecological emotions are affecting educators and students, about the importance of emotions in the educational setting. And he's going to give us 3 key skills that support wiser responses to the climate predicament and provide pedagogical techniques for integrating emotional experiences in the classroom. And then he's going to close by giving us a climate-focused mindfulness practice so that we can all go home with a practice to manage our own climate anxiety. Kevin Gallagher has a JD and a master's degree. He's an attorney, an author, and director of Emergent Resilience, a nonprofit that helps government agencies, academic institutions, corporations, and nonprofits foster resilience for a climate-changing world. In addition to a law degree, he has a master's in international affairs with a focus on international environmental institutions. Kevin has worked on climate and environmental law and policy issues as an attorney in Washington and as a policy specialist focused on international peace building with the Public International Law and Policy Group. Thank you, Kevin. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you, Connie. It's a pleasure to be here. Wonderful to be here with everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to come and explore this really important topic that is so prevalent and relevant these days. I will share my screen, and please let me know if there are any issues seeing that. And so, as Connie mentioned, I come to this work as a climate change attorney, and so I spent a long time working on climate policy at various levels, federal, state, and international. And what I realized after quite a bit of time doing that work is that the climate movement, particularly the professional climate movement, needed more skills to really respond to what was going on. Just a focus purely on policy and regulatory action wasn't going to be adequate. That there was a cultural shift that needed to change, and a lot of that was around the skills that we have as individuals to cope with the big changes that are happening, the big losses that we're experiencing, and to change the culture itself in ways that can allow us to care about more, to move away from that culture of uncare that Sally Weintraub talks about, that Caroline mentioned. And so I see the work that I do as capacity building for the climate movement. And so the question is, how can emotions support a better climate movement? On the one hand, the emotions can be painful or difficult, but they also offer us an opportunity to create a healthier, more resilient, and more effective climate movement. I describe this as the push and pull of climate emotions. On the one hand, we want to address our individual pains, our anxiety, our grief, our sorrow, our guilt even. Those are all deeply unpleasant experiences, and we want to not be stuck in those places. But on the other hand, there's the pull of, from a strategic perspective, how emotional wisdom can make for a more effective environmental movement. They can improve our response to social and environmental degradation and change in all its forms. The culture of uncare is, in fact, a political process that serves business as usual, and it helps those who are actively harming the planet in so many ways. So if we can shift to a culture of care, that will help us do the political work of moving to a new regenerative, life-affirming system. So what does this really look like? So the options in front of us when we experience climate disruption are really two paths. They're the path of climate reactivity or the path of climate resilience. And there's a feedback between our individual experience and the social systems that we inhabit, and then our capacity to respond through mitigation and adaptation to the climate disruption. And in which path we choose will have an impact on how much disruption we experience. So if we were to not address the psychosocial, the emotional experience that we're having, what does that look like? Well, if we don't deal with our emotions, that looks like burnout and physical disease. It's stunted emotional intelligence. We're less capable of relating to the people that we're around. It's poor decision-making. So the decisions we make as activists or policymakers are going to be less effective and less likely to address the problems that we're trying to face. It'll be stifled creativity. The universe of options that we see in front of us will be smaller and more constrained because our thinking will be more rigid. There will even be increased consumption that goes along with that. So there's a substantial body of research that shows in emotionally colder environments, there's more material consumption. So if we don't address our emotions, in fact, our individual environmental footprints are likely to be larger than they would be otherwise. And then all of this will funnel back into increased social dysfunction, reduced climate action, more climate inaction, and a larger problem for us to face. And then the alternate is climate wisdom, where we really become aware of what the internal experience is. We begin to integrate those emotions and find the wisdom that they have to share with us that can build social health, create deeper, stronger ties between us and the people that we're around, with the animals, the larger living world, can improve our capacity for mitigation and adaptation and allow us to move forward. And so with that, I want to zoom out a little bit on emotions before I move on to emotions in the educational context. I want to just reframe our understanding of emotions. There's a really sticky idea out there that emotions are some holdover from our mammalian ancestors, that they're an inferior process that we just need to suppress or get away from, that they don't really help us, and they in fact hinder us from being rational. And that's really not accurate, and also incredibly unhelpful for what we're trying to do. And in reality, emotions are an essential part of who we are as living embodied beings. They're our body's response to complexity. Our emotions are how our bodies take in the information from our physical environment, our internal states and resources, our entire life history and experience, our social context and all the complexity that comes with that, even our goals and aspirations. It gathers all that up and gives us actions to do in response to that huge amount of information. And so emotions are a key part of our strategic toolkit. It's a part that is literally there to save our lives, and hopefully we can let them do that. So when we look at emotions, there are two core components that I'd like to focus on. The first is the affect. This is the embodied aspect of our emotions. So the sensations and feelings produced by the nervous system in response to internal and external stimuli. And then the other piece I want to look at is the meaning. And so this is the way that our brain interprets those sensations and feelings that are happening in the body. And so it does this through various things such as past experience, the set of socio-emotional concepts. These are words like eco-anxiety or solastalgia or fear or anger. And then the social reality that we inhabit, the social rules of the places and the cultures that we inhabit. So this leads us to the first of our key skills, interoception, our capacity for interoceptive awareness. This is the capacity to know what's going on inside your body. This is just another sense like sight or hearing or vision, our internal version of those senses. And this is a way to know what is happening with our body, to become more granular in our capacity to feel and consciously experience the experience of our bodies. There are a variety of practices that can support this, your capacity to grow this ability. Things like yoga, meditation, the coherence practice that we did to begin this program was a great one. Other breathing practice, temperature activities is a good one for younger people. So building the awareness of sensations and hot and cold in the body. The next key skill is emotional granularity. So moving from the coarse, unrefined, ambiguous understanding of what our emotional experience is, and moving out to a more granular and nuanced understanding where we really know what it is that we're experiencing and have that in our consciousness. And then the last of the key skills I want to focus on is emotional solidarity. As I said before, emotions are positional and they're political, they're enmeshed in the social systems that we inhabit. And so when emotions are denied, for example, if the child in the Maldives, if we deny his ability to mourn for his friends, the fish, that can be a political process and a form of oppression that is reducing his capacity to experience the world and changing the shape of what we care about. And so in order to address that and change the shape of what we can care about, emotional solidarity becomes a key tool. And it actually expands the tools available to us as a climate movement to change culture in that way. So looking at all of this in the context of education, we find that all the important cognitive functions that we need for education, learning, attention, memory, decision-making, social functioning, they're all affected, implicated, and subsumed within our emotional processes. So they're integral to everything we do in the learning environment. And so how do we move through the stages or kind of the progression of becoming aware of our emotions? Again, bringing that awareness to them and then integrating them into our lives. It begins with an unconscious experience of them. This has many different forms: denial, defense, transference is a key one. From there, we can move to an emotion-focused coping strategy. This is where we just try to get rid of the difficult experience. And so this is a different way, less effective than some of the others, but this includes things like overwork, distraction through social media or video games, numbing, and addiction is another way that this can play out. From there, it's focusing on the problem, and this includes information seeking, behaviors, and activism. And I do want to make a note of caution. It's important to shift from anxiety to action, but if we stop there, that can often lead us to burnout. If we are just dependent on the external problem being solved, with a problem that's as big as climate change, if that is what we're basing our well-being on, then we can end up in a place of burnout and overwhelm. And so we actually want to move beyond that, where we're still active, we're engaged in addressing the problems, but we've integrated and find meaning in our personal lives and our own identity of who we are. And it's about our relationship to the problem being, we're having the relationship to the problem that we want because of who we are. We want to promote justice. We want to promote healing and repair and well-being for all living creatures, or whatever that identity is for you, whatever that meaning is. So when we're in the educational context, we really want to interrogate the feeling rules, the emotional habitus, as some call it, the emotional norms. And when we do that, we recognize there are certain ways that emotions can be excluded from the spaces that we're in, particularly in the classroom. So there's disenfranchisement of emotions. This is when they're not openly or publicly acknowledged or legitimized. There's emotional oppression. So this is when reasonable emotional responses, like the ones that we've been talking about today, are denied uptake by the dominant community. And this has been a big topic of what we've talked about, the other speakers have talked about today. And so this is often experienced by marginalized communities and can lead to feelings of powerlessness or a lack of agency. Transference is another one. This is what we see in ecofascism, where legitimate fears about environmental concerns can be transferred typically onto marginalized communities or to some other that is out there. It's also done through consumption. So discontent and discomfort that we feel and can be transferred by marketers into consumption, saying that we'll be happy if we buy this car, it'll solve all our problems. And then to other emotions. Renee Lertzman has done a lot of work here showing how feelings of care and concern, if they contradict our social identity, can be transferred into apathy or cynicism. And so we really want to understand the feeling rules of the places that we inhabit so that we know how they're affecting our capacity to experience emotions and then to act on our care for the world. And so some pedagogical tools that we can use, there's a whole spectrum of these, beginning at the simplest with just for educators to inform themselves about ecological emotions, and then to really delve into their own internal experience, to reflect on what their emotional experience is and do the inner work of addressing that and processing it. Validating the student experience. Again, these emotions are so isolating in cultures where these emotions aren't known about or where they're rejected entirely, they're disenfranchised or oppressed. And so validating the student experience can be a really important part of addressing this within a classroom. And then acknowledging the educator's own difficult experience to the students, to express and kind of express solidarity with them, all the way down to embodied activities, collective action, and finding meaning. So there's a whole range and a spectrum that we can use, many tools to allow us to bring emotions into the classroom. And so how can you help create a wiser climate movement? As we've seen, climate emotions are hard, but they are also an opportunity to enable a more meaningful educational and activist experience, one that can ultimately help lead to a healthier, more resilient, and more effective climate movement. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kevin. Really useful tools that we can take with us into the classroom or into our homes with our kids. Jim and Caroline, I invite you back. You can have a brief conversation before we need to close. Actually, we didn't have the mindfulness practice, Kevin.
Would you like me to go right into that? I'm happy
Do you
to
want to
do
do it now, Jim, or when we close?
Why don't we do it as we close our session?
Okay.
And Kevin, how long does it take?
It's adaptable, but 5 minutes is great. It can be less than that if necessary.
Yeah, if we go 3 to 5 minutes, that would be good.
Perfect.
Well, thank you both. And Carolyn, I'd just start with you. I think it's so important what you said in your initial remarks about the critical importance of honoring the anxieties and the fears and the concerns rather than doing what most of us do most of the time, and that is repress them because it indicates some kind of failure or of will or weakness on our part. So that's a very, I just wanted to underscore the importance of that, because unless we face that, we're not going to solve it.
And we don't want to invalidate our defenses either, Jim, because this can be pretty overwhelming and frightening. And some of us, we need to compartmentalize sometimes to be able to function. So I think it's a question that each of us can kind of contemplate. How do we hold climate awareness? How do we remain present with it and all the feelings that come up with it, and continue to do our work? I mean, that's kind of what I wanted to address here. How do we stay connected to our inner world and also contribute and engage in the social world?
And I think that the other point that you made, Carolyn, which was so striking, given what I said in my introduction and what I think is generally true, is that the anxiety is as much about what the governments aren't doing as the crisis itself. Yeah. If the governments were, all hands on deck and COP27 was building on a successful COP26 and we had a sense of momentum, I would imagine that most of that anxiety would melt away because we all had a sense that the solution was at hand. And it's the absence of that I think is really at the root of the anxiety. It's not so much the climate as the inaction of our governments.
Well,
do you agree with that?
That relates to Kevin's, Kevin's point about transference.
It's the inaction, but it's the lying about it. So if they were being honest that they didn't care, then we wouldn't have our brains pretzeled by this. We'd be able to think straight and feel straight, and it would make sense. For me, this resonated far more with the young people that I've worked with for decades who've been traumatized and abused within birth families. Because the very people who are supposed to be protecting you and taking care of you are also the people who are hurting you, who simultaneously are telling you that they love you and they care about you. So what happens is your whole attachment model, who do you trust? How do you trust people? Gets completely messed up. Mm-hmm. And what happens is you get this distorted sense of belonging and relationship and trust. And it's that I think is causing the unbearable nature of the anxiety. This is the thing for everybody, but that's where it's unbearable, because what's broken is your capacity to feel human and feel held and be seen and validated, and therefore not feel alone. One thing I would say, how do I do this? Very short. Is I think I no longer work in a therapeutic dyad. It's never just me and a person. It's a therapeutic triad now. It's me, the person, and the planet. So I'm in planetary relationship, and Elizabeth did this in her presentation by having a picture on the wall. I think we were twins and separated at birth somewhere, because I've got the picture of the planet on my wall too. And, it just creates that relationship with the planet. So it's the person and the planet. So it's always about therapeutically moving and giving people permission to breathe and remember that they're part of the planet. And so the healing is not just personal, it's also planetary. And that takes some of the fear away. It makes it meaningful. And it's not just about my survival, it's about planetary survival. Because you can, if you can't feel secure with people, you can feel secure with the trees, or with the dogs, or with the elephants, or with the grass. So a simple exercise I suggest to people regularly is go and sit with your back against a tree and just say, help me. You help me, and I'm trying to help you. Move into relationship with the tree. If the relationship with people is fragmented and you're feeling betrayed, trust the trees, right? So that's a way of kind of navigating some of this massively unprecedented, difficult time.
Yeah, Kevin, what would be your comment?
You know, I just got kicked off the video. My connection's been pretty rough. What was the question? What was the...
Well, we were just talking about the importance that both of you stressed, Carolyn in her remarks and yours, of the importance of honoring the anxiety, and that the anxiety is not just about climate disaster, but about the fact that our governments aren't doing anything. And as Carolyn just said, that cognitive dissonance, puts us in a pretzel. We don't know exactly what to think about who. And then she was just making the point that it's really a trilateral relationship between us and others, but also the planet. And sometimes it's a good thing to just sit with your back to a tree and say, I'm trying to help you and you need to help me. And, I know you addressed many of those points. So what would be your comment? You mentioned transference and various other psycho-emotional complexes.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. I mean, I think the natural world, one of the things that we didn't really touch on much is the way the modern world kind of overwhelms our bodies. And there's, so much digital distraction and, the way companies hijack our reward system and overload us with dopamine. And so when we go out into the natural world, that can actually be reparative in and of itself. And, this idea of wisdom is really being fully open to the experience that we're having, and recognizing that the anxiety has something to teach us about if we're willing to go into it and be with it, and allow it to inform our actions going forward. And same thing with grief, that's love looking for its home, right? And so that informs us about how much we love these things that are being lost and how much we want to show up for them. And so, yeah, I think I am in complete agreement with and alignment with all of those things.
And then I wanted to just tease out. Go ahead.
One other tiny thing that can help with the feelings and the overwhelm and the complexity. It's often the feelings about the feelings that is the problem. So anxiety is just anxiety, and I'm not minimizing it. Depression, anxiety, they're uncomfortable, but we're not living in a comfortable time. And it's often the messages that we give ourselves about the feelings that creates the even more distress. So it's the feelings about the feelings that is problematic. And this is following really what Kevin's just been saying. So if you accept the anxiety, that the anxiety is meaningful and it makes sense, don't get anxious about your anxiety. Don't get depressed about your depression. Remember that this is actually an emotionally healthy response to what's going on. And that kindness and compassion towards yourself and your own emotional responses can stop that spiral of feeling terrible and then crashing, and then feeling terrible and then crashing, because actually it gives you a kind of gentler relationship with those feelings.
So these emotions that we tend to characterize as negative emotions, right, are sort of by definition, my expertise is in negative emotions, in the shadow. They are by definition something to be eliminated. And what we're saying in this moment, and actually for me at all times, but especially in this time, is there's information, there is intelligence in these feelings, in these sensations. There's intelligence.
There's beauty. There's beauty.
There's beauty, and there's direction. They can actually guide us.
Mhm.
These difficult feelings can guide us to a passionate, meaningful life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Connie, let me. Go ahead, Carolyn.
Well, I just wanted to agree. There's beauty, there's joy. This is like trying to live in a world without winter, without rain, without darkness, without nighttime. We can't live in sunlight. We need that other. And this is splitting off and projecting onto the other, all of the negative. You know, anxiety doesn't know that it's problematic. Anxiety is just anxiety. And the problem is we then extend it out into the world, and it underscores other relationships like homophobia, racism. And it says that we can live without giraffes and elephants or ants or mosquitoes, because we label and other them as bad and the other. And it's the healing of that relationship with the other that is crucial at the center of this.
Beautiful.
You know, Connie, I'd like to just deepen this a little bit by having you, since you know so much about the shadow. Where does shadow play in healthy anxiety about climate change? Is the depression, the anxiety about climate change, is that part of the shadow? Is that a distinct sort of negative complex from the shadow? How do you understand how shadow plays a role in people's emotional and psychological responses?
Well, the shadow was the name that Carl Jung gave to the unconscious. And we are sitting here aware of the climate crisis. So it's not in the shadow for us. For people who are in denial of the current situation, it's in their personal shadow. And collectively, it has been in the collective shadow for 3 to 5 decades, right? But now, because there's so much catastrophic weather and obvious climate-related events happening, it's emerged from the collective shadow, and more and more and more, both individuals and corporations are aware of it. We could say that, you know, the fossil fuel companies contributed to stuffing this issue into the shadow if we looked at it psychologically, because of their vested interests, right? And part of what happens with shadow material is we project it, we attribute it to others so that we don't have to live with it in ourselves, because by definition, it's forbidden. It's unacceptable, just like what we're calling negative emotions, they're unacceptable. So we project, and that's part of how we create the other. And there's a lot of othering going on within the climate movement as well. There's a lot of enemy making happening. And that's partly the engagement of the shadow. So it's kind of a complex question, Jim, and I'd love to talk about it more, but that's kind of my initial comment on it. And especially for people who are doing personal shadow work, who are looking at their unconscious material around the climate crisis and trying to make a conscious relationship with it. That is one way that we can move toward activism and engagement. So I wrote about this in my book, for people who feel blocked internally, for people who feel that they have a conscious intention to engage climate activism, but they can't, or they don't, or they won't, that's a shadow issue.
Right.
That's an internal unconscious obstacle that they're not aware of, that's keeping them from moving where they want to move. And so there's this connection between our inner work and our outer work. That's our topic. Between our psychological work, or I call it shadow work, and our engagement. And because we need all hands on deck and we need everybody engaged in this, doing whatever they can, our inner work becomes really, really crucial now.
Yeah, so if I understand you correctly, and I'd love to have Kevin and Carolyn comment, denial or apathy around climate is when we're in the grip of shadow. But when we acknowledge it and speak about it, as Carolyn and Kevin have been articulating, Elizabeth, then is when the anxieties become healthy, because we're recognizing that which the rest of the world is seeking to deny. So that means that these negative emotions aren't shadow. They're the redemptive transformational response of our own bodies and psyches to bringing us into an alive relationship with nature and with the potential of climate disaster. Would that be, I know these are very complex issues, but would that be more or less accurate about what you're saying?
I think that's an eloquent simplification. Sorry, Kevin.
I was going to agree. Yeah, I think that's incredibly well said. The point that I would add around the shadow is that there's the collective element of that. And a lot of that is related to social identity, the way that people are enmeshed in these larger identities that can prevent them from moving through that shadow and really accessing and exploring their authentic emotional experience.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think, this internal process of disallowing or trying to cut out the parts of our psyche that we don't like, that we label as bad or wrong, or is reflected, mirrored in our relationship with the world. And the disallowing and the cutting out and the treating the natural world with contempt as expendable. So there is this internal process that is mirrored in the outside world. It's no surprise that there is this huge numbers of eating disorder, particularly in northern industrial Western nations, eating disorders, body dysmorphia, self-harming behavior, epidemic levels of mental health problems. So we get richer and richer, but poorer and poorer in terms of our psyche and our soul, and our capacity to relate to our environment and feel comfortable in our environment. Well, a lot of my qualitative research has been about exploring this shadow with children and young people through storytelling. And can I just very, very quickly just give you a quick response from a child, because it epitomizes this so beautifully. I love what you were saying, Connie, and also you, Kevin. But I used to, this was pre-COVID, I used to turn up to people's houses to interview their children, and parents often would say, oh, I don't think they even think about climate change, right? And I'd say, yeah, well, we'll see, because I knew by then, yeah, they do. And I have a single question that I ask for my qualitative research. And I encourage parents to sit in the room and listen. And this was just before Christmas, and the dad was sat next to the Christmas tree. And I asked his 9-year-old my single question, which is, if climate change was an animal, what would it be and what would it say? Because climate change itself is relational with the shadow. The shadow that's erupting is also climate change and the biodiversity crisis. So we are finding a way to reenact that and reproduce that. And I want to just tell you what this child said, and then I'll shut up. He said, oh, given that this is a father who said, I don't think he thinks about climate change. He said, oh, climate change, it's a crocodile. It's the size of a continent. And climate change is crawling all over the face of the earth, and it's eating and eating and eating, and it'll never stop eating. And it's rotting from the inside out, and its scales are falling off, and it lurks in the shadow, and it waits, and it comes out. Dad is sat the other side of the room with his eyes on stalks, absolutely traumatized. And this child is telling me this amazing story of this creature that is consuming. And this is how he personified climate change. Children know about climate change at an imaginal level. And this is how we connect the shadow with the unconscious, with the emotion, with the external activism. That imaginal movement enables us to do this. The child later on said to his dad, "That was the most fun I'd had in weeks."
Oh,
So which is lovely, right? You don't want to traumatize children as a researcher and a therapist, right? But that storytelling allows us to connect with that shadow, which is otherwise unbearable. Because the fact that we are destroying our planet, our home, that we are part of that is unbearable. And it's about finding ways to face that. And that's partly what I'm hoping to try and bring here as well.
beautiful story, powerful.
Beautiful story. And I know we're really pressed for time, but there's
Yes.
just one more question that I want to ask all of you. And that is this distinction that's being drawn between pre-traumatic stress disorder and post-traumatic stress disorder. With climate, it's pre because it's anticipatory. With, war, it's post because you've had the experience. You've not fully integrated, and therefore you're traumatized on a recurring basis. But are there any other distinctions that are important for people to bear in mind about PTSD, whether it's pre or post?
Well, I can jump in, and what I'll say to that is I think the pre often refers to the direct harms in pre-traumatic stress, is that there's this expectation of future direct harms, but we're all experiencing the indirect impacts all the time right now. Right. And so there's an element of it that we're, in that sense, we're all past the pre. We've moved beyond that when it comes to the indirect harms, that we're all experiencing that. So we're in the trauma now. We're going through it. And so
there's pre, present, and post, and we've shifted from pre to present.
Yeah.
Well put.
Traumatic stress.
Yeah. Exactly.
We're in present traumatic stress because we are now in climate disaster.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Great point. And
we're seeing that in all of our social institutions at every level, international and state level. And yeah, so this is something we're going through right now. And also that this is something that's important for me, is this is not something, the scale of this problem is bigger than any individual human. We need each other to bear the burden of this stress. We need to do this together. And, that's how we evolved, and that's how we'll get through this.
So shall we close with a meditation?
Yes. I was just wondering if there's any final comments you want to make, Connie, before we go into a final mindfulness.
I don't know if you want me to say anything about that question as well. I'm happy to if you've time, but I'm happy to.
Sure.
Timothy Morton, the philosopher, is brilliant on this. He talks about it being post-traumatic stress as well. The other thing to keep in mind is that the research shows us that the distant experience of climate crisis is as impactful as the close experience of it. There isn't that artificial differentiation. So again, we're using Western medical mindset thinking if we differentiate too much between those two. And I think that brings us back to that sense of the collective unconscious. The thing I suppose I want to finish with is just to remind us that we do not have an internal psychological map that shows us how to deal with the climate emergency, because we've never faced this before. Talking about things as unprecedented is a little bit tedious, but this really is unprecedented. And how humans maintain hope is by imagining ourselves into the future, imagining our way forwards, and imagining rebuilding. The problem we've got with this, and we're rebuilding in Ukraine even during war, this is how we maintain faith and hope for the future. The problem we've got with the climate crisis, and I don't want to end on a terrifying note, so I'll try and bring it back to something positive. But the problem is we're halfway through the story of the climate crisis. We're not at the beginning. It's not avoidable. We're halfway through, and we need to wake up to the fact that we're halfway through. We can change the end of the story, but we can't avoid the story. So we need to wake up to the fact that we're halfway through, because there's things that are lost which we will never get back. And this is where grief and honoring what's lost is so crucial and so important. And this is moments where I talk about creatures that we've lost, like the bramble key melemy. We need to grieve this loss and honor it, because that helps us understand how we need to preserve and love what we have left and take action to take care of what we've got left. We can imagine a different future, but we can't do it by thinking, oh, well, when this is over, when we got over it, when we've got beyond it, we can rebuild, because we can't get beyond it. We've got to live with it. And that is a transformational psychological move. And not understanding that is partly what gets in the way of this.
Gotcha. Excellent
Sorry.
point. This has been a very, very powerful ending to our 10-day program on the COP. Everyone, Connie, thank you. Carolyn, Kevin, Elizabeth in her absence, many thanks for what you're doing. Let me just add on a quick, slightly humorous note. As you all know, we've got Black Friday coming up next Friday, as beginning in America, but now throughout the industrial, neoliberal capitalist world. We're in a frenzy of consumerism, which is contributing to climate change. So Ubiquity University and a number of partners out there have launched Back to Friday, to reject the god of consumerism and embrace the goddess of love. So it's not Black Friday, but Back to Friday. I put the link in the chat box for those of you who are interested. It's just Back to Freya, Freya, who was the goddess of love in Scandinavia, backtofriday.com. So just a little light relief, little something that we're doing to elevate the mood for the week, next week, but also to make a very important point that there's a lot that all of us can do at this critical time to support the effort to secure the human future. And on that note, Kevin, why don't you just give us a few minutes of final climate activism meditation?
Absolutely. And it's a great transition from Friday. I figured we've spent so much time today with the difficult emotions, the unpleasant ones, that I'd focus on the other side, the way that climate change in this experience can actually be a moment for us to begin to bring more care, more compassion and love into the world. And so as we begin, just know that there's no right or wrong way to experience this. Just be an open-minded witness to your experience. If it's difficult, just allow it to be that way. So we'll begin by making ourselves comfortable. Settle in and find an easy, balanced position. Perhaps close your eyes, allow your body to become still, and focus your attention inward. Bring your attention to your breath, the air moving past your nostrils, the expansion and contraction of your abdomen and chest. Observe your experience with gentleness and curiosity. Perhaps now bring to mind the feeling of being with a person or an animal, someone who you love and who you know loves you back unconditionally. And feel the love that you share with that being. Keep feeling that love. See if you can sense it flowing through your heart, perhaps as a feeling of warmth spreading from your center. Maybe growing and expanding in rhythm with your breath. Wishing that being that you love and that loves you to be happy and well. Now perhaps share that warmth and love with somebody else you know well. Again, maybe an animal, a friend, or a family member. Feel the sensations of that experience, the warmth of that love. Now turn this kind attention to yourself for your hopes of what might go right and fears about what might not. For all the ways that you find this time difficult and hard. For all the ways that you are showing up to this time and living into the best version of yourself. Perhaps now extend that feeling of warmth and love to an individual or group who you see as being a climate champion. This could be someone you know, someone famous like Greta, or a climate scientist, or even an activist group. Whoever it is, feel that generous flow of warmth moving through your heart, extending towards them. Now turn your attention to all those in Sharm el-Sheikh and around the world, wherever they are and wherever they have come from, who have worked so hard. The activists, the negotiators, the cleaning crews, the scientists, the reporters, the event coordinators, the cooks, the diplomats, and everyone else who has played a part in focusing the world's attention on climate for the last 2 weeks. Send all of them your love and care. Finally, turn your attention to our gathering here and extend your kindness and compassion to everyone in our gathering today. Everyone at Humanity Rising, Connie, Caroline, Elizabeth, and myself, and to everyone around the world who cared enough to show up today. Take a few last silent moments and bathe us all in the warm glow of your kindness and compassion.
Thank you, Kevin.
Welcome.
Thank you, Connie. And all of your work has been so extraordinary. This has been a very powerful ending to our COP program. And the essence, everyone, is that the inner work that we need to do, as Kevin and Carolyn and Elizabeth have said today, is as important as the outer work. And in fact, you can't do as effective outer work as you would want unless you do the inner work. The two are inseparably interconnected. And in doing the inner work, you have to confront the anxieties and the fears and, in fact, the terror of climate disaster. But as has been pointed out, if you take this challenge up and wrestle with the demons that are in your own psyche as you look at a possible future, you'll be empowered in such a way that the work that you do in the world will be commensurately fortified and effective. So we end this program knowing that humanity has to rise. Our governments are not taking up the challenge, and that if we take it up in our own way, in whatever way we can, perhaps someday the governments will respond because the people are leading. Thank you all so much. That brings our session to a close. You're all welcome to the after session chat group. You'll see the link in the chat box. Great program, and we'll see you again on Monday for a continuation of Humanity Rising. Thank you, everyone.